Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Canadian Shield. My name is Sterling. I'm your host. The Christy Freeland was called to the Finance Committee to defend her budget and to answer questions about pertaining to the economic policy of the federal government. And she was scheduled originally for 2 hours. And then at the last minute, like literally like an hour before the meeting began, before the committee began, they informed them that she would only be coming for 1 hour. And that's important, because that doesn't allow for the second round of questions, or excuse me, like the third and fourth round of questions, which, means that they have to put a lot of questions off and they have to sort of pick and choose. Now, because of that, Christy Freeland kept talking and talking and talking to try and drag out the clock. And, the conservative members weren't really having it. The liberal members and everybody else just sort of patted her on the head and said, "Isn't everybody wonderful?" Of course. It's kind of a no-brainer that they're going to be pushing this budget through. That's why they removed the capital gains tax, because the NDP couldn't sign off on that. So they removed it so that the NDP could approve the budget. However, the conservatives are not, pushovers by any means. And they ask a couple of simple, straightforward questions. And Christy Freeland snaps. She loses her mind. At one point, she actually tells the chair to intervene. She doesn't use words, but I have it. I'll show it to you. However, before we get into it, I would encourage you to like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, tell your friends about this channel, share this channel. All right, let's do this.
Minister, do you think it was fair to increase the carbon tax 23% when 70% of Canadians told you not to?
8 out of 10 Canadians get more money back than they pay in with the price on pollution.
Minister, your carbon tax is actually a tax plan and not an environmental plan, and the PBO on multiple occasions came to this committee and proved a lot of the stuff you're saying is misinformation and false. For example, he said just a few weeks ago that a majority of families pay more into this carbon tax than what they get into these rebates that you're talking about. Last time you were here, for example, in your own words, an average Albertan family gets $1,800 in rebates, but I have the PBO report here in my hand that says an average Albertan family pays $2,900 into the carbon tax. Do you think it's fair that an average Albertan family has to pay $1,100 more into the tax? Is that fair to them? PBO wrong?
The average 8 out of 10 Canadian families, very much including Alberta families,
but he said a majority of families are worse off.
Than they
Is he
pay
wrong?
In on a.
So, Minister, I think it's clear to see that by you ducking and dodging the facts that you absolutely are still peddling misinformation about the carbon tax. And someone who claims to love Alberta wouldn't take extra $1,100 in a carbon tax and what they get in rebates. So I just want to make that clear. As I move on, Mark Carney just testified yesterday at the Senate committee, someone who will probably be your next leader, and as someone who's rumored to be also a leadership candidate in the next Liberal leadership race. We saw Mark Carney also duck and dodge the question of if he supported the carbon tax. So before you launch your campaign, we wanted to know, will you continue down the path of Justin Trudeau and quadruple the carbon tax? I think
and
the
political
Canadians need
horse
to know
racing.
if you're running
I'm sorry,
for
Mr. Helland, I didn't
leadership.
interrupt you. Our
Fair
caucus.
enough, Minister, because I have a short amount of time.
Mr. Helland, please don't
on
interrupt
that
me.
note,
You me
and
no
as a
choice
follow-up
but
to that
you
question,
give me no
Minister,
choice but to answer.
I just
and
wanted
I'm
to
quite
ask,
happy.
then do you
I'm sorry,
support
Mr. Helland,
his
I didn't.
So you can see that MP Halan is not being pushed around by the minister for, when she's up there peddling her continued lies about the carbon tax and talking about how the parliamentary budgetary officer is not smart enough of an economics, an economist. They got some random economist from the United States to tell them what they wanted to hear, and that's who she keeps talking about. And of course, because they're short on time, MP Halan is like, okay, whatever, I'll just move on to the next question. You heard him say that he just wants to know if you're going to continue the carbon tax when you run for the leadership of the Liberal Party, which though they're speculating will happen. And she can't take that, right? Like she has no absolutely zero couth, right? He's not getting riled up. He's not doing anything. He's just simply doing his job. She's snapping and slamming the tables and throwing bodily, you can see her twitching and moving around like a crazy person. Now I want you to see what she's going to do. She's going to look at the chair and she's going to move her eyes like this, like to the side, like, hey, do something about this, with her eyebrows up. And it'll be the first time I did it, but I put it in slow motion after. So here's the first play, then comes the slow motion. All right, let's check it out.
I didn't interrupt you.
Minister Yalan, if we could just.
So I'm sure she thinks that she's being very coy. Like, most of the Liberal Party, she thinks everybody's too stupid to pay attention to the things that she's doing. But that was obvious. Look at him, tell him to shut up. And he intervenes right away because I guess he's just a lapdog instead of being the head of the committee. But I'll tell you something. If she was really so serious about her budget, she wouldn't need any of that. If she was so serious about the economic stability of this country, she wouldn't need any of that. But we all saw it right there that she raised her eyebrows and looked over and then looked down like somehow she was faster than the camera, right? It's terrible.
Minister, under the 9 years of your government, rents have doubled, literally. They were half what they were before your government took over. Rent prices are outpacing income for the first time in 60 years. Your $89 billion photo op slush fund, supposedly for housing, after you announced that, has doubled rents. I want to know, how did you spend $89 billion to double rents?
It's a good question.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Halan. And I am actually glad to see all of us paying attention to housing. I think it is one of the most pressing issues for Canada and Canadians, and that is why with this budget and with action we have taken, our government has put forward the most ambitious plan.
So you'll see at the beginning, you noticed at the beginning that he was saying to her, is that fair? Because they're saying fair and ambitious, right? And now she's saying it's an ambitious plan for housing, but they've been talking about housing for years. They've done nothing. It's just thrown $90 billion. You can't get any apartments built. You can't get any houses built. I mean, you think of the idea that if you'd have just given people $1 million, they could have just easily built their own house on a piece of property. They could have bought the property, bought the house, the whole 9 yards. I mean, everything would have been done, taken care of, and problem solved. But now we move to MP Lawrence, because that was the end of the round. Now we'll go to the next round where she runs into an even worse problem because she just absolutely refuses to answer the question that he asks her 3 times.
Minister, simple, straightforward question for you. Which country has the worst per person income drop in the G7 in the last 5 years?
And I think I can see the direction you're wanting to travel in. And so let me reassure you by pointing out that in the last quarter of 2023, Canada had a healthy move in GDP. The first quarter of this year shows strong GDP, 2.5%, and we're seeing that reflected in the productivity numbers too.
Thank you, Minister. What was the per capita GDP growth in Q4?
As I said, I can see the direction you're going, and that's why let me take this opportunity to highlight
Answer the question.
Good, solid GDP numbers in Q4 of 2023, really good GDP numbers in the first quarter of this year. And in terms of productivity and per capita GDP, I think the outlook for this year is into the per capita numbers.
Thank you. And I'm glad you're a fan of oil and gas there. That's good to hear. But I want to get back to my original question. Which country had the worst per person income drop in the G7 over the last 5 years?
I think that I have spoken to some relevant measures of.
Thank you, Minister. Are you? Could you just please answer this question? If you don't know, just say you don't know. That's fine. What country had the worst per person income drop in the G7 in the last 5 years?
I think I've spoken to where I see
Minister,
as a really
I do
good measure
appreciate
that
that, and,
speaks to
and I would
people's
love to get
lives.
to some of the underlying, but first we need to sort of put where the baseline is. And so, just to put an answer on that, is that Canada is the worst in the GD7 of income drop over the last 5 years in the G7.
And of course, she knew that. That's why she refused to say it. That's why she kept trying to say that, oh no, things are looking up. She even went to so far as to say that the Trans Mountain Pipeline is going to help. That's why he made the comment about oil and gas, because now all of a sudden she's leaning on the oil and gas industry to try and say GDP will cramp up. Think of how many times you've heard this woman use the term GDP.
The U.S. is at 8% increase. Italy is about 7. Japan is a little shy of 4. Then we have France, UK, Germany is slightly negative, and Canada is an outlier at negative 2%. GDP per capita has a real impact on people. In fact, that's how most economists measure the economic well-being. We've also had 7 quarters now where Canada's GDP per capita has been shrinking. If, in fact, we measured GDP on a per Canada basis, we would be in one of the longest recessions. Since the Liberals formed government, our GDP per capita, our economic growth, has not grown a bit in the last 10 years. We are in a serious economic crisis, and it's troubling to me, Minister, you won't answer basic questions.
MP Lawrence and Minister, listen, I'm going to have to, I know.
So that was the end of the time, right? And she, of course, smiled pretty and didn't want to answer the question, because she can answer the question, because she knows that if she had answered the question, a person like me would have a soundbite of her telling you from her own mouth how the economy of Canada is nowhere near what they claim it to be. 7 straight quarters. That's almost 2 full years. And I'm certain that in a minute they're going to tell you the same thing. I mean, that we won't know until July or something, but it's 7 straight quarters since they took, and they can't blame anybody anymore, right? There's not a pandemic to blame. There's just no growth. There's not a single solitary economic policy that the Liberals have put forward. None of their budgets are making us any money. None of their investments quote unquote investments are making us any money. The overall GDP has dropped by 2%. That is huge. That is huge. If we didn't have so many natural resources to sell, we would literally be considered a third world economy. We have 7 straight quarters of decrease, and now the average individual is making 2% less, is able to spend 2% less. And that's just the earnings. That's not against the overall debt ratio of the shouldering the debt of the country. And she'll try to say something like the median debt, but the median income, but the median income is only measured on average, right? So just because the rich are getting richer doesn't mean that there's more people getting poorer. And so they try to move the median income into the conversation. If you hear that, don't let them fool you. This country is bad shape economically. And I have a clip from the Bank of Canada guy saying that what did he say? Liabilities are overestimated, and it's possible that we'll be making a sharp turn, which is economic speak for the whole thing might crash. What I want you to understand is, doesn't matter what political stripe you are, economic problems don't care. And when you listen to this woman dodge and weave and avoid answering questions about the carbon tax, avoid answering questions about the GDP, avoid answering questions about the economic output of Canada, do you really think we should be giving her $300 billion? Do you really want to put your grandchildren in debt so that this woman, this NDP liberal axis of power can put more money in and cause more problems? I mean, they're doing absolutely nothing with the money the billions of dollars we've given them so far. They don't have a single solitary idea what they're doing. I think that's obvious. If they did, she wouldn't be avoiding it. I'm not even going to base it on anything other than that. I'm only going to base it on the fact that she refused to say out loud that it was Canada that didn't make any money, the only country in the G7 that has gone into the negative, and the only country in the G7 whose economy has shrunk in the last 2 years. She didn't want to say it out loud. She carries 2 jackets in this country, right? deputy prime minister and finance minister, and she doesn't want to tell you that Canada's in a bad way. She wants you to ignore it so that she doesn't have to be called accountable for it. That's the only thing that makes any sense to me. And of course, that's why she didn't want a second round. That's why she didn't or third and fourth round. She backed it to that second hour. If the Liberals were so serious about it, they would stop with the talking about, the little roll up your sleeves and get your back and all that stuff. And they would just answer the question. They would just be honest and straightforward. I don't think that they want to admit to you or to themselves. But I know one thing. I know when a person is avoiding a question or when a person is trying to reframe the answer, they are hiding something. And as Canadians, we have a right to know. All right, I'm going to wrap here. I want to thank you all for listening. I would appreciate it if you would like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share this channel with your friends. I'll talk to you next time.